The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hi, my name is Leo Connors and welcome to The Ring and All Other Sports. Tonight, I got a very special guest making his second appearance. He's going to be promoting his upcoming book, Knuckles Nelson.
Leo, it is great to be here with you tonight in the state of New Hampshire, the home of great wrestlers like Triple H, Freight Train Fulton, and Steve Bradley.
Yep. It's Freight Train Fulton. I haven't heard that name in so long. Wow. All right, so listen, I want to talk to you about your book. You have a book coming out, and you said February 11th?
Yes.
Which you said happened to be your mom's birthday.
That's right.
Which is an incredible story.
Yeah.
What I want to do is talk to you about writing your book, and then we'll talk wrestling, and then we'll talk more about your book before the show's over. How long did it take you to write it?
Well, I'm never at a shortage for words, so I'm sure we can fill this show up, no problem, but it took me 2 years to write the book. Yeah, I started writing it in 2018, and it'll be out this year.
Wow, that's amazing. 2 years. What made you want to write a book?
There was a long period in my life where I always felt like I had a book inside of me, but didn't really do anything about it. And then in 2018, I was going through a lot of difficult times in my life, a lot of hardships, a lot of personal problems, things that life just wasn't going well. I wasn't in flow at all. And I ended up coming to a decision to jump on my Harley Davidson and drive down to Shawsville, Virginia, and look up my childhood hero, Handsome Jimmy, the Boogie Woogie Man Valiant, which I am here representing tonight, Boogie's Wrestling Camp. I am the Northeast chapter president. And anyway, I met Boogie at the New England Hall of Fame a couple of years ago when it was in East Providence, Rhode Island. Yeah. And Joe Bruin, who puts on that event and hopefully will again in the future, is a guy that I respect a lot. I have a lot of respect for Joe.
Me too.
And he's a good friend of mine. And I went to the event, I think it was at the Bright Bridge Club in East Providence. And, Boogie was my childhood hero and someone that I really, like, my first earliest childhood memories of watching wrestling on television were the Valiant Brothers. So I wasn't going to miss this. I was going to go down there and hopefully get a chance to meet him. And I got to meet him briefly that night, but anything further than that wasn't meant to be. He just had too many people around him, and he was out of the building quickly after the event was over. But while I did speak to him, he asked me if I was interested in ever coming down to visit his wrestling camp in Shawsville, Virginia. So the next thing I knew, I was calling up my friend Jeff Katz, who lives in Virginia, and I said, Jeff, I'm going to go down to visit Boogie's Wrestling Camp. Do you want to come? And he said, yeah, I do. So we went down there, and my experience with him is all in my book, which is called Waking Up: From the Wrestling Ring to the Yoga Mat. And from the wrestling mat to the yoga, The name of the book is called Waking Up. I wrote it. I should know the name, right? From the wrestling ring to the yoga mat.
Yes.
And I just had I was a little overwhelmed then because Boogie really changed my life.
Nice.
He really did.
That's awesome.
He was extremely helpful in a lot of the questions that I have. Like, he could have easily just said to me, it was nice to meet you and thanks for coming down. But we became very close. I consider him like, I wouldn't say he's a second father because I have a father, but I would say that he's like an uncle to me. And I'm not going to go into too much of the detail of what he talked to me about that day, but we went back to Richmond after we left Shawsville, and I ended up spending a few days in Richmond with Jeff Katz, who is my best friend.
Right.
And one night we went to the Virginia War Memorial to hear a gentleman speak. His name was Craig Rossi, and he wrote a book that's called, the name of his book is I can't even think of the name of it, but it's about a Marine that in Afghanistan, he found a stray dog.
Right.
And he ended up smuggling the dog back to the United States. And it's a great book.
Right.
And Craig was up there saying, I'm a Marine. I never thought about writing a book. And when I was sitting there listening to this guy in an auditorium full of people, him and his dog up on the stage, that was when I decided I was going to write a book.
Wow. Just from hearing from a guy you didn't even know.
It was really more of him saying, I just didn't ever think that I would do it.
Right.
And it never was in his head. And just sitting in that moment, I realized that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to write a book.
Nice. Well, you said Jeff Katz is one of your best friends. A lot of the people around here that watch the show, I got a lot of younger guys that watch the show, young wrestling fans and young wrestlers. Can you tell them a little bit about Jeff Katz, who's pretty much a legend in the New England area for independent wrestling?
New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Famer. I met Jeff through the Boston Bad Boy, Tony Rumble. Tony was bringing me into, when I was really just first starting out, to wrestle for the Century Wrestling Alliance. And Jeff happened to be in Boston working for WRKO on the radio. Nice. And so he ended up coming in to work on Tony's television show, Century Wrestling Alliance Mass Madness. And Jeff just immediately elevated everything because of his professionalism. Right. And he had been trained in wrestling by Larry Sharp.
Oh, wow.
And down in New Jersey. And he had a history down in that whole area. Right. And so me and Jeff became friendly there. And, Jeff did everything from, ring announcing to television interviews and, and hosting the show.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, people really do need to know about, because I remember Jeff being around and doing all kinds of stuff. So, you know what I mean? Behind the scenes for Tony, and then, excuse me, with you and your wrestling Star Wars, which you said last time you were on it was a shoot on World Class Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, it's a tribute to World Class Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, which was my favorite. I mean, I love that stuff. All right. So what is your work schedule like when you're writing a book? I mean, if you have time in the morning, do you write before work?
Well, for the last 10 years, I've worked for the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority, and I transitioned from professional wrestler to bus operator, and that was quite a change in my life, and I'm very grateful and fortunate to have that job, and I have a very flexible schedule. When I write, my favorite time to write is when I wake up in the morning first thing. Okay. I can do it at any time, but It was usually when I would wake up, I would just sit down and start writing then. Nice. That's my favorite time.
So would you wake up earlier when you were writing your book, or would it just be normal time? You just get up and write?
Yeah, whenever I got up, I would just immediately sit down and just start writing. That was the time when it seemed to flow the most, and what I really wanted to get out of me. And when we mentioned Jeff Katz, Jeff was the one that always reminded me, keep writing, and go back and fix it later. So that's what I would do. I would just write. When I first started writing, I sat down at my kitchen table with a pen and composition notebook, similar to the one you have in your hand right there. And I filled up 6 of them in like one sitting. I just kept writing and writing. And when I was done, I drained like 4 pens, and I just couldn't believe that this just poured out of me. Yeah. And then that was early on. And then over the period of time, more and more came out. And actually, I had to wait for more and more to unfold. I was actually writing about stuff right after it happened. So things were happening in my life that I didn't know I was going to be writing about them until they happened. Right.
Wow. That's amazing. All right. So is there going to be anyone upset, you think, with after they read your book? Is someone, is anyone maybe you've had heat with in the past?
I have such fond memories of my time in the wrestling world. I'd be surprised if anyone was upset with anything that I wrote. The thing that I will say about this book is I told the truth. Right. Everything in it is the truth. I don't think that there's anything in there that I could say I embellished in any way. Right. And I'd be surprised if anyone was, because I've come to terms with a lot of things in my life and have total forgiveness towards myself and anyone else that I felt may have in some way harmed me in my past, or during the wrestling years. I just have nothing but fond memories about everyone and anyone I was ever in the ring with, or anyone that I was on the road with, or so I'd be surprised, but you never know.
Right. I know one guy that used to come on the show quite a bit. It's a good friend of yours, and he passed, Big Woody. So there must be some Big Woody stories in your book.
Big Woody is prominently mentioned in my book, because it would be hard for me to write a book about my time in wrestling and not mention him. Yeah. Woody I met him, and he was just a fan. He had he really wasn't involved in wrestling. And then he started giving me rides to shows, and we became really close friends. And and it got to the point where I introduced him to Tony Rumble, because he was coming to Rumble shows, and Rumble said to me one time, "Woody's got more personality than anybody on my show." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, not me." And he was like, "Oh yeah, he's definitely got more personality than you." And I said, "No, he doesn't." He said, "Yeah, he does." And the next thing I know, they're becoming really good friends. Right. And just before he passed away, before Rumble passed away, he told me he was going to bring Woody in and start using him as a manager on the shows. And it never came to be, but obviously after that, I opened the Wrestling Star Wars office, and Woody was all over that show. He was an in-ring wrestler. He had a body slam contest, and he was also one half of a broadcast team with Brian Webster.
Oh, wow. Another great guy that's done a lot of things in the New England area with wrestling. All right. Let's see. Do you have any suggestions? I told you off air that I have tried to write before. And I don't know, after a couple of chapters or whatever, I just it's like a roadblock. Like I hit a wall and then I give up. So is there any suggestions to help someone become a better writer?
Well, I would be repeating myself, but it's the advice that I would have is to just keep writing.
Right.
Keep writing and go back and fix it later and tell the truth.
Okay. And what about now, like when you wrote the book, they take care of the punctuations and things like that. I mean, obviously, as you're writing the things that you know exactly go there, like a period and stuff. But if you don't, they take care of all that, right? The publishers?
Well, let's see. As far as that goes, when I first started writing, I considered trying to find people to help me with the book very similar to getting into the wrestling business, because you just really had no idea who you could trust. Right. And I was very lucky when I found my editor, Nancy Chase, who was right here in Massachusetts and a diehard Red Sox fan. And Nancy led me, after she helped me to edit the book, when I presented it to her, every time I would give her what I felt the book was done, she would say, go deeper, go deeper, go deeper, go deeper. And I would say, I can't go any deeper. And she would say, yes, you can. And this went on for a while, like working with her. And then she led me to Redwood Publishing Company, which is in Irvine, California. And Sarah at Redwood Publishing, anyone that is interested in writing a book, I would say reach out to her or to me to put them in touch with her, because she was just like Nancy. She got hands-on with this thing. And she told me that she really didn't know anything about wrestling. And by the time she was done editing the book, she said she was just completely emotionally invested with Boogie's wrestling camp and my wrestling career and all the other things that I cover in the book.
That's pretty neat. And someone that you didn't even know when you started writing the book to help you out in the end. That's really awesome. All right, listen, let's I got a few fan questions. And we'll talk about, your book again a little later on. First fan questions. I just want to say this. I reached out to your former tag team partner, Mr. Intensity, Eric Sprazier. And he wants to congratulate you on your new book. And he says you look very happy. He's very proud of you, and he can't wait to see you soon.
You trying to make me cry on the air here, brother?
No, but seeing I did that, now we got to get him here. So, Eric, come on, man.
Well, Eric Sprazier could tell a lot of stories on the air. And Eric, I really do hope that you come up here sometime. I love Eric Sprazier. He and I, we formed a formidable tag team in that time. We had a run.
Definitely.
And there was a time where we were right on the doorstep, and there were a bunch of circumstances that it didn't happen. But I hope he comes on the show too, because when I started wrestling, he had already been wrestling for years prior to that. He can go back to the ICW days and tell you stories that I just can't tell because I wasn't there yet.
Right. See, I always thought you were around at that time. When you first came on the show and told me you were trained by Bob Evans, I was blown away. I thought you were trained by, seriously, Walter and stuff. I thought you were in the business 10 years longer than you were.
Well, in 1992, I was trained, and I am proud to say I was the first person trained by Bob Evans and another young 16-year-old kid by the name of Nightmare Nick Steele. And Nick Steele and Bob Evans are also mentioned quite a bit in my book. It would be hard for me to write a book without mentioning these people when it comes to wrestling, especially Bob and Nick. And for example, I remember the first time I walked into the Coastal Pro Wrestling training facility, which was in Freetown, Massachusetts. They had a brand new ring in a beautiful, well-lit building. And as I was walking through the door, literally my foot through the door, Nick Steele was coming off the ropes, and he had catapulted himself through the air, and he dropped a leg on a guy laying in the middle of the ring, and it looked like he decapitated him. And I sat there, and I was just in awe. I stood there, I was in awe. And Nick came over, he put his hands over the top rope, and he looked at me, and he said, "How was that?" And I said, "That was effing awesome, man." And he was like, "That's called a stealth leg drop." And then he just went back to working in the ring, and that was my introduction to Nick.
Wow. And great guy who passed away much too young. All right, so Joey Kilmartin. You know Joey used to wrestle as Joey Rage? Trained by Bo Douglas. stories on Tony Rumble. Can you give Joey a story on Tony?
I could fill up a whole hour with stories
Yeah.
on Tony Rumble.
Right.
My favorite Tony Rumble story, I've told it before and I'll tell it right now. I was fortunate enough to have wrestled on the first ever Eddie Gilbert Memorial Show, which was in 1996 down in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It was myself and Scott Dickinson and Tony that jumped in a car and drove down there. And when we got to the show, there were like 100 wrestlers hanging around that were not booked trying to get on the show.
Right.
Some of the wrestlers that were on the show were Dory Funk Jr., Jerry Lawler, Abdullah the Butcher was there, Tom Brandy. There was a bunch of people that were there.
Right.
And anyway, through this cluster of chaos that was going on, here comes Jim Cornette walking through, and he walks up to Tony Rumble and he says, "Tony Rumble, you old dog." He goes, "Could you do me a favor and book this thing today?" And right then and there, I knew I was with the right person.
Yeah.
And because on my own, I would have never had a chance to get on that show. I was a kid up here in New England, and I had no connections. So I ended up in a tag match with 3 other guys that were from the New Jersey area. And they're going over the match, and the referee, they were all from down in that area. And they're going through the match, and I'm just standing there. And they're very animated, going through everything, what they're going to do in the match. And at one point, Tony comes over and says, "What's going on in this match?" And he said, one of the guys said, "Well, we're going to do this, 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 this. Then they'll tag in brother," and that was me.
Yeah.
And we'll hit a big move on him and pin him 1, 2, 3, and that'll be the end of it. And Tony said, "I like it. I like everything except the finish." He said, "What we're going to do is you're going to." I'll be at ringside already. I'm going to slip Knuckles a pair of brass knuckles. He's going to come in. He's going to knock you out. He's going to knock your partner out. He's going to knock the referee out. Then he's going to turn and knock out his own partner. And you're all going to sell like you're dead in the ring.
Nice.
And me and Knuckles will stand tall in the ring, victorious. Even though we'll have been disqualified, we're going to stand strong. And Tony looked at me. He said, "Is that okay with you?" And I tried to keep a straight face and
Right.
said, "Yeah, sure." I mean, I really was nobody. There was like, for this to happen, one of them was Tom Brandy, one of them was Billy Kidman, and the other one was the Inferno Kid.
Wow.
And so they were
He
all
was
pretty.
red hot back then, too.
They were all very,
I was surprised
very.
he didn't do a lot more.
Yeah, they're all very well-known wrestlers, and
Right.
they were not happy
Right.
with this story that was going on here. But the thing about Tony that I also would like to say is Tony ran wrestling promotions that were very unique. I mean, he had all these established stars mixed in with young up-and-coming talent, and everyone, it was a big, happy family. Everyone was just so happy. We all were happy in our roles. Nobody was, everything changed so much after he passed away with all these different wrestling promotions popping
Right.
up all over the place. Mine was one of them.
Yeah.
But, I just loved him so much.
The wrestling scene in New England would have been way different if he was still alive.
Tony used
You
to
know that. I
To-
mean,
yeah, he used to tell me that he wished they were giving out these development contracts back then in WWF and WCW.
Right.
And he used to say, "I wish they'd just give me one of those deals so I can do what I do and have some money to do it." And it was really a brilliant idea. It never happened, but it would. Tony Rumble's first match in wrestling was against Bruiser Brody.
that's amazing.
His second match was against Superstar Billy Graham. These were his first matches, coming into the wrestling
Is that
world.
with the Savoldis?
That was with the Savoldis, yeah.
Because they used to come down they used to do their TV shows in Lowell. I used to go to those shows. And I mean, Abby would be there, Brody would be there, Kerry Von Erich was there one time. It was amazing.
It was amazing.
Amazing. All right, so Anthony Mark Balkas, who is Atlantic Pro Wrestling's probably biggest fan, huge fan of Big Gun. He's got a question for you, Anthony.
Sure.
How did it feel to come out at APW on Big Gun's last match, and how did you guys keep it from him? And just so you know, Big Gun afterwards said, "Yeah, I'd like to know how they kept it from me too."
Well, Atlantic Pro Wrestling, in my opinion, is the premier independent wrestling promotion, possibly in the country, definitely in New England. And Joe Moakley is a longtime friend of mine, and I'm just so proud of him of what he's done, because he started out in my wrestling school. I mean, he actually would do the music for my shows on Wrestling Star Wars, and he had this beautiful sound system, and he basically gave it to me that I could just keep at the combat zone and use for and he was really. He couldn't have been more sincerely involved in wanting to be a wrestler. That kid really wanted it. So fast forward to last year, he told me that Big Gun was retiring, and if I was interested in coming up to be a guest referee for the match. And I was all over that idea. I thought it was great. So and he said, we're not going to tell anyone. That made me like it even more. So I actually stayed in the car in the parking lot for the entire show. And when the time came, he came out, and Joe came out to the parking lot. He said, come on, it's time. So as we were walking in, I stopped him. I said, hey, Big Woody's smiling down on us right now, isn't he? And we just had a moment there where he was like, yeah, he really is. And when I came out to the ring, it was clear to me, even under the mask, that Big Gun did not know that I was going to be there. And I gave him a hand salute out of respect. Yeah. He had a really long run in the wrestling world in the New England area, and he's the first inductee into the APW Hall of Fame, and it's well deserved. And I was just really happy to be a part of that and to have been able to just to hang out with those guys again for that night with Derek Mitchell, Joe Moakley, Big Gun, and Woody was there that night. I felt him.
Right, no doubt. I got to see you that night too.
And of course, you were there too.
Yes, that was a great night. A good friend of mine, Dave Fournier, wants to know, what was it like going from just wrestling on shows to promoting wrestling Star Wars? I think you might have answered this before, but...
Well, Dave's a great guy.
Yeah, I love Dave.
Thanks for the question, Dave.
He's got more.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. It was time for me to stop wrestling. It was time for me to get out of the ring. Like I had gone as far as I could. Like there was, in a lot of ways, when I was able to go into a WWF ring or a WCW ring or, in Japan, all the places that I went, I was lucky to have even been there in the first place. And I didn't know it at the time, but I look back on it now and it's like, wow, I was average, in my opinion, at best in the ring, as far as being a wrestler goes. Okay. But because of my connections with Tony Rumble and Jim Cornette liked me too, and these were things that really helped me to get to where I was. But when I got into the running shows, and originally I had started, after Tony died, helping with NWA New England, but they wanted to do something different. They didn't really want me involved, so I ended up going and starting wrestling Star Wars. Right. And it was an opportunity to stop being self-serving and caring about myself and how I looked in the ring, and having an opportunity to help other people further their career. And in some cases, it was serious. These people were going places. I had people like Velvet Sky, Dylan Cage, Ron Zombie, Eddie Edwards, Fred Curry. These guys were the top independent wrestlers in New England at the time. And we all know where Eddie Edwards went. And I am so proud of that kid. I mean, he was like 16 years old when he was coming. And my personal favorite, a young man by the name of Tony Gangster.
Oh! I know his lot. What's Tony's? Delfonso.
He'll always be Tony Gangster to me.
Tony Gangster. Now, who was his tag team partner? He had a partner too, didn't he?
He may have. You mean in wrestling Star Wars?
Yeah. Well, I know when he was Tony Gangster, he had a tag team partner.
Yeah. If he did, the name's eluding me at the moment, and I apologize for not knowing who it is.
Because I don't remember it either.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been trying to get Tony on the show for forever. I had him booked once, then he had to cancel because of his job, and then he hasn't answered me back. So Tony, I have a feeling you'll be watching this one, because I'm going to even tag you in the video when I post it. So you have to watch it. Let's come on the show, will ya? Dave Fournier has another question. What was your favorite match?
If I had to pick one match, I mean, I had hundreds of matches. If I had to pick one match, it would be... And it's funny how that just popped into my head, and I haven't thought about it in years. But because we're going back 20 years now. One night, I got a call from Killer Kowalski, and he asked me if I could come in and fill in for Brian Lee. Brian Lee was supposed to wrestle as Chains, right? And he was supposed to come in, and he said, "Can you come in and do this match, because I don't have anyone." And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I get there, and my opponent was Too Cold Scorpio, and I didn't know him at all, right? But he was seriously cool to me. And he was like, okay, so I'm like wearing my Knuckles Nelson gear, and Walter comes over and he goes, "What are you doing? You're changed tonight." And I was like, "No, everybody knows me here, Walter." And he said, "Damn it, your name is Chains." So I was like, okay, so I guess I'm changed tonight. And so, but we went out there and we tore it up.
Right.
We really tore it up. Too Cold Scorpio was like calling the whole match, and he let me give him a pile driver, and he didn't hit the 450 splash, but he hit this moonsault where I was laying on the canvas, and it was a very unique position to be watching someone do a moonsault. Because back then a moonsault was not they do 7 of them in a match now.
Right.
This was not the case at the time. This was a
Right.
big move, and he came off, and it was just like this slow motion thing where he came through the sky and he landed right on my face and chest, and I didn't feel a thing. It was beautiful. Like his he was a big dude,
Very big dude.
but he was light as a feather in the ring. And I would also say that one night I wrestled Cactus Jack in a Falls Count Anywhere match in Salisbury Beach at Champs Arena, and that would also be on the list. In any match with Steve Bradley, I wrestled Steve Bradley a bunch of times. In any match with that kid, he was so ahead of his time.
Yeah.
When he was a young man, right before he went to WWF,
Right.
which I keep saying, I'm sorry, I should say WWE, but I just tried to keep up with him.
Right.
He just had all these ideas and all this stuff that he wanted to do, and all of it was like, yeah,
all
okay,
made
yeah,
sense,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And he would, he was the first person I ever recall seeing throwing me out of the ring. I'm standing outside the ring, and he's on the apron, jumping up to the second rope and doing a backflip moonsault from there.
Moonsault.
And I just remember, saying, "Please, God, let me catch him."
Right.
Because I just wasn't used. I also remember him going from in the corner, facing the corner, jumping up to the top rope and doing a forward somersault. I'm sorry, I don't know the terminology of these moves, but
outside the ring?
outside the ring, over the ring, over the ring post,
Right.
to his opponent on the floor. So it was only a matter of time before he got signed, and he did.
Yeah. And they say a lot of guys like from around this area, like Maverick told me that he used to put on shows when he was 15 and he'd get 200 people at his shows. And then he wanted to start really like making money. So he ended up talking to Jeff Clausen, who taught him a few things about promoting and stuff.
There are some people that were born to do this, and I think that Steve Bradley was one. I think Bob Evans was one. I think Nick Steele was one.
Right.
I think Eddie Edwards was one.
Yeah.
There's just these guys were just destined to do this at some point in their life.
Right. And Eddie Edwards is amazing. Amazing. Great guy. All right. What are some of your memories of being part of the Brotherhood? Another question from Dave Fournier.
My first memory of the Brotherhood was not being a member of it. It was being aware of it from television. I used to watch ICW on Channel 12 in Providence when I was younger, and I was well aware of Tony Rumble and the Brotherhood and the members that had been in it, people like Tony Atlas, Taz. And when he told me that he was reforming the Brotherhood, and one night we were in Salisbury Beach, and he called me out to the ring, and he offered for me to be in the Brotherhood in the ring, and I didn't even know he was going to do this.
Wow.
And it was after I had just got the crap beat out of me by my future partner, Eric Sprazier, and a bunch of other guys that were known as the Cash Money Boys. And these guys came out, and man, they put the boots to me that night. It was like, I just remember every single shot being like way too stiff.
Right.
And when I finally got up to my feet, Rumble came in the ring. This was not something we talked about. Right. And he said, if you come with me, I'll put you in the Brotherhood and good things will happen to you. And it was a shoot. Because I ended up in the WWE,
right.
WCW. I wrestled in Japan for Wally Yamaguchi. I went down to the USWA in Memphis, and I was a 3-time NWA World Tag Team Champion. So I would say that's a guy like following through on his word.
Yeah, absolutely. And which you guys should check out his very first episode on the show, which I want to say it was episode 148 or 140. So in the 140s. I know that. You definitely should check out that interview. All right, Dave also wants to know, how did it feel to win the NWA World Tag Team titles at the 50th anniversary show? Now, that show, was that the one in Houston?
That was in Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah. During that time period, the NWA had definitely taken a downward spiral because WCW left the NWA and started recognizing their own champions, and the NWA was really just a glorified independent. However, when we won those belts, it was real to me. It was real. We were not expected to win that night. We were in the ring with other established teams, including Tully Blanchard and Tom Pritchard, and it was like, none of them were happy about losing, us going over in that match, us winning the match, and I was really believe in my own crap back then, so I felt like it was more real than it really was. I mean,
Okay.
Wild Bill Irwin told me one time, the only thing a wrestling belt does is make your suitcase heavier. And however, when we went to Japan, the NWA still had the same name.
Right.
Japanese wrestling fans are extremely serious, and they take history and tradition very seriously. And I found when we went over there, the NWA name still had a lot of respect. And so when we were wrestling, when Eric and I went over there, I went there on several tours. The first two were with Eric, and we were just surprised that, like, wow, the NWA, like, even in the airport, like we were greeted by fans. It was cool.
That's pretty awesome. So when was Tony the one that put you guys together, or whose idea was it to put you and Eric together?
I think the way it worked in the back, the office part of this, was the belts were coming into Tony's possession.
Okay.
And he had to decide who was going to wear them, and he put me and Eric together.
Right.
And when I look at if I were to look at some of those early matches that we were together, we were not a good team. We were just two individual wrestlers, and we really didn't. And so we ended up going up to Killer Kowalski's school and working up there with Mike Hollow and Walter helped us a lot too. And we were able to get it together as a team, and and we became a good team. A lot of people looking back now, I hear people say, wow, you guys were really stiff back then. I didn't realize it at the time, but I guess we were. And it's funny because then when I went to WWE, and I was like this big shot in NWA, and then I go to WWE, and I was like, I couldn't have been any lower on the card. And that was a real reality check for me too, as to where I was in the wrestling world.
Right.
Once again, I was lucky to have just been there in the first place.
Right. It's amazing. So you made appearances in both. This is Dave Fournier again, his last one. You have made appearances.
When do I get to ask Dave a question?
You can ask me. I'll have to answer it. What you made appearances in both WCW and WWF. What was it like working there? Before you answer that, there's a follow-up. Another guy has a question, very similar. Green Wayne Powell. Do you know him?
I do.
Okay, because I was going to say, I don't know him. So he must have known you. But he says, hey, Leo, I would like to know how Knuckles feels his experience working for WWF different from his time in the NWA. Thanks. Have a great show. Breen, thanks a lot for the question.
Well, he's also known as Magnet Man. He is a BWC family member from down in Virginia.
Oh, nice.
And I appreciate him chiming in here today, and also Dave with all his great questions. The difference between the NWA and the WCW or the WWE is going from junior high school to senior in college. It was a real eye opener for me. My first match in the WWE, a lot of people don't know this, was in 1993. I had 16 matches, and I went to the Providence Civic Center, and I thought I knew what I was doing. And I was so green, you couldn't even call me green. And I wasn't even green yet. Wow. And I went to the Civic Center. I found Tony Gurria, and he said he knew what I wanted before I even opened my mouth. Yeah. And I proceeded to tell him about 5 lies. How long have you been wrestling? 5 years. A lie. Who trained you? I said, Paul Roma trained me. A lie. I thought if I said someone that was a known wrestler, it might help my chances. Right. How come I've never heard of you? Like so anyway, he told me to come to TV the following week in White Plains, New York. Right. And so I jumped in my car and I went down there. And when I got there, he said, do you know who Razor Ramon is? And I said, of course I do. And he said, well, go introduce yourself to him, and you'll be working with him tonight. And so I went up to Scott Hall, and this guy had been like a seasoned pro 10 years before I even thought about getting into wrestling.
6'8", 300-pound dude. You must have been intimidated.
Well, it was the night after he had won the Intercontinental title for the first time. Okay. So here's a guy who is the brand new Intercontinental champion standing across the ring from a guy with 16 matches. I didn't get to throw one punch. I just took every one of his moves. I took a belly to back suplex from the second rope. I took just everything that he did. And I remember when I watched it on television weeks later, because back then they would tape a bunch of TV, and then you would, it would be on TV for the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. And he gave me this suplex off the top rope, and it looked like it killed me. And Macho Man was doing color commentary, and he said, "Welcome to the World Wrestling Federation." And so that was when I realized I'm not even remotely close unless I want to do that.
Right.
But I always had it in my head, and I think if you don't have it in your head that you're going to be the world champion or at least the Intercontinental champion, if you're going to have a decent career, why bother? Why bother doing it in the first place? And I did. I believed it. That's where I was going at some point. So I went back to the independents for a long time, and when I went back to WCW in 1997. I had a match on Monday Nitro, and they put me in with the Big Show, who was called the Giant at the time. And I realized again, they're never going to do. I'm surrounded by the biggest names in the wrestling world, so I'm never going to do anything but be a jobber there, which was fine. I am not saying there's anything wrong with that. Same thing when Cornette started bringing a bunch of us NWA guys into the WWE. It was more of the same. It was just the only thing that I was ever going to do there was going to be to make someone else look better. But there's nothing wrong with that. I'm very proud that I ever had an opportunity to step into a WWE ring, because a lot of people, thousands of wrestlers, never even get that chance once.
Exactly. I mean, you worked a lot of places. Like you said, you worked for the USWA, you worked in Japan, NWA, WCW, WWF, WWE. A lot of guys don't even get a chance at one of those spots. But luckily, right now, I want to talk to you about a kid that just actually got signed by the WWE recently, Anthony Green, who now goes by the name of August Gray. Have you seen any of his work recently on NXT or anything?
I have not.
He got signed a few months ago. Do you know Anthony at all?
I've never met him, no. I know who he is, though.
Okay. He was signed along with another guy from around here, Josh Briggs, who's a big guy, but we haven't seen Josh on TV yet. So, all right.
My favorite local wrestler in this day and age by far is Brian Malonis.
He's my favorite wrestler. No lie. It's so funny that you said that.
If I hadn't worn Boogie's Wrestling Camp shirt tonight, I would have worn my Brawler Malonis shirt, because I just think that he gets it. That kid gets it. He totally gets it. He understands. He has respect for who came before him, and he has respect for what's going on now. And that isn't always the case.
Right. You must have been very excited when he got signed to Ring of Honor, and then they re-signed him again. So, I love that. Did you used to listen to his podcast?
I've heard it, yes.
It was I love that show. I thought it was great. And but like on that show, he would be able to get some guests. Like the one time he had Carrie Silken on. He had Ian Riccoboni from Ring of Honor. And then they brought in Brian Fury. Now, Brian Fury no longer owns the New England Pro Wrestling Academy. No longer owns Chaotic Wrestling. And are you friendly with Brian Fury?
I don't think Brian and I have ever had a conversation.
Really?
Yeah, I never. I was never involved with Chaotic Wrestling at all. I never wrestled there. I never had one match there, so I don't really have any exposure other than to it at all.
Wow. Okay. Now you're from Rhode Island, so some of the guys that I remember I used to read about in the magazines, like Wrestling Review, would be Danger Boy Alfredo and Wolverine. I actually met Danger Boy Alfredo at one of Joe Bruin's Pro Wrestling Hall of Fames and Fan Fest. Great guy. And are you familiar with those guys? Did you work with those guys at all?
I never wrestled them, but I know the Wolverine. I know him. He's a great kid. And the last time I saw him was also at Joe's event, and he was talking about possibly starting some sort of wrestling museum or Hall of Fame of his own in Rhode Island. But when you talk about wrestlers from Rhode Island, the names that come to mind for me would be people like Ronnie DiMaria.
Yeah,
is someone that was a wrestler before I was.
That's Ronnie Delicious?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Ronnie D was, in the WWF back in the 80s and had a long run in the wrestling world. And, back then there was only a few of us that were actually from the other one would be that comes to mind right now would be the Mountie, Ray Roy.
Yes. And matter of fact, the most famous thing I remember Ray Roy was when he was Santa. And didn't Austin stunned him in the ring?
Yes.
That was pretty cool.
It was.
I actually reached out to Ray, tried to get him on the show, and he said maybe down the line. He said he's a little too far for Nashua. All right, let's go back to your book. Do you have a story in there of the first wrestler you met?
Oh yeah, the book will be released on February 11th on
Yes.
Amazon in paperback and Kindle. And the first wrestler, my first wrestling show, one of the first wrestling shows I attended was at Mount St. Charles Academy, which is a very well-known high school that is most known for hockey.
Okay.
And a lot of the guys that went through there ended up in the NHL.
Right.
And there was a wrestling show there one night, and I used to beg my father to take me to wrestling, and it was Jimmy Valiant. You know, he was the first person that I remember being eye to eye with,
Right.
and I tell the whole story in the book in great
Nice.
detail. And you know, when I was a kid, there was a bunch of neighborhood kids that we used to go. My friend Bob Catroci and Billy and Kevin Kennedy and Bobby Bowie, and we would go and load into a car, and we would go to the Providence Civic Center, the Warwick Musical Theater, the West Warwick Civic Center, the Rocky Hill State Fair, you know, Jack Witchy Sports Arena, all these places where wrestling was being held. And you know, my family, my parents weren't wrestling fans at all, but there was no escaping the ring for them because I was constantly asking them to take me.
Right. Now, how do you say it? Witchies?
Witchies.
That is like, it's a famous place for, they had wrestling there forever. It just seemed. I never went to a show there. Now, what city was that in?
It was in North Attleboro where the Emerald Square Mall is now, and the parking lot is where Jack Witchy's actually stood. And you would go there on a Friday night, and you could actually extend your leg and touch, if you were in the front row, and touch the ring apron. There was no such thing as security barricades or entrance ways. You know, a door would open and the wrestler would walk through the door.
Now, would they be there? Was it every Friday night?
Yeah, I think it was every Friday night.
That's unbelievable. It really is. For them to be able to make money. And I'm sure the place was packed all the time. Wrestling was so big back in the 70s. I mean, it got bigger, obviously, you know, with Hogan and then Austin and The Rock and all that. But back then, man, they used to just pack little small buildings. Like I told you before, I grew up in Lowell. I was at the Lowell Memorial Auditorium all the time for wrestling. Place was packed every single time. It's just amazing. Let's see. Now, we can't really talk about where to spend money for that. I can't really say it. You can't really, you know what I mean? But where could someone check out where they might be able to find your book?
Oh,
After, you know what I mean? There's got to be places that you can tell everybody.
that was very slippery of you, Leo. Very nicely done.
I couldn't remember exactly what Dick told me I could say.
Well, that's easy. I have a Facebook page for wrestling, for Waking Up, and you know, also a Knuckles Nelson page, and Instagram, Facebook. You know, the normal places.
Excellent. And you said it's coming out February 11th.
Yes.
Over 400 pages.
Yes.
How many pictures? Just curious.
I haven't actually counted the pictures, but there's dozens of photos of you know, some pretty unique stuff from my time at Boogie's Wrestling Camp to my wrestling days, stuff from Japan, some photos with, you know, from those days, and I'd just like to touch briefly, if I can, about there's also, you know, Jimmy Valiant was a big influence on my life, but another person that's a big influence on my life is a guy by the name of Rusty Brown, who was the lead singer of Electric Mary, which is a rock and roll band out of Australia and Melbourne. And Rusty was extremely friendly to me during some really tough times in my life, just like Boogie was. And I ended up going over there and going on a tour of Australia with them, and
I followed your pictures.
Introduced them on stage, and made some really great friends. And in addition to my Boogie's Wrestling family, I also have the Electric Mary family, and the people in Australia are just extremely hospitable. They're just wonderful people, and everyone was just so nice to me when I went there. And you know, there's a whole section in the book about my travels to Australia, and the name of that chapter is called "Of the Electric Mary Persuasion."
Now, who wrote the foreword for your book? Could you want to tell that?
Oh, sure. Okay. Jeff Katz wrote the foreword for my book, and it was something that I had asked him to do because Jeff and I have such a long-standing friendship. Right. You know, one of the things about our friendship is I can sit here and tell you stories all day, but when you're sitting there with someone that you actually lived the stories with, it's it's a little different. And me and him, whenever we get together, which surprisingly we get together more often than you would think with him living in Virginia,
Right.
and of course with social media, and I can start a story and he can finish it, and vice versa. We just have so many memories of so many great things. Or I could even just say a short reference and just look at him, and I know he knows exactly what I'm talking about. And Jeff is. Jeff is the king of Richmond, Virginia. He's on WRVA radio. He's on the air right now as we speak. And
Is he really? Yeah.
He's got a very highly rated radio show down there, and I would recommend anybody listening in on that.
It's funny because that was my dream. I never dreamed of having like a public access television. My dream was always to be on the radio, and it just seems it's going away more than it's. Do you know what I mean? Like it with the internet and everything. I mean, I don't listen to the radio anymore. I go to YouTube. I want to listen to an album. I punch in the album on in the search bar, and I listen to the whole album. I don't even have to buy it. I mean, it must be so hard for bands nowadays.
It killed everything. It killed the music business.
Yeah.
And Jeff could speak more to what's happening with radio than I can. But what his position as having an afternoon show, those slots are so sought after and so few. And he could tell you more about what's going on with the radio business. Everything's become automated.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I mean, he's been doing that for what, 25 years, if not more?
I can't say the exact, but he's been doing it since I've known him, and that's over 20 years.
Yeah, he's been doing it a long time. And like you said, he worked for I mean, I'm older than you. I'm 56 years old. Just turned 56 on Thursday. Thank you, everyone, for the happy birthday wishes. But no, really, though. And I remember RKO. That was before FM hit, it was RKO. That's where you heard all your hits.
Well, Leo, two things. First of all, I'm older than you. Okay, I'm 57. And second thing is, what you do here is keeping wrestling alive, brother.
Thank you.
That's what you're doing here. So please don't ever for 1 second say, look at it in any negative way. You are keeping independent wrestling alive and giving someone like me an opportunity to come on here and talk to a very large audience. Your show is watched by a lot of people.
It really has, and it's because I've gotten guests like you, guests like Tony Roy. Do you know what I mean? Like, and don't get me wrong, all the other guys that I've had on the show that aren't well known yet, I'm trying to help them get known. And I love doing the show. But I was just being honest, like a little jealous. Jeff Katz got that great job in the radio, and that was always my big dream. And I mean, I'm not too old to do it, but I just don't see it happening.
I'll give you a little bit of Jeff Katz trivia right now.
All right.
Prior to his career in radio, Jeff Katz was a Philadelphia police officer.
No way. I would have never guessed that.
Well, that's an expose. I just dropped it right here on your show.
That's it. Yep. Jeff Katz knowledge. Nice. I want to go back to Big Woody. Seriously. Because like I told you before when you're on, he was on the show like 5 or 6 times. One time he brought me Luis Ortiz, Demon Ortiz, and Woody was not happy with me because me and one of his best friends, Todd Sopel, had some heat. But even though he was, Todd's was one of his best friends, Woody still did that and came in, you know what I mean? And I just think that just kind of shows the type of guy he is. He made a commitment that he wasn't mad at me, but he still kept that commitment because that's the type of guy Woody is. That's from what I see. He actually, he did great. Do you see the episode by chance?
I may have.
He got up with 15 minutes left and said, and if people don't like Todd Sober, you can kiss my big fat. You know what? And he walked off the stage.
Well, I could do a whole hour on Big Woody.
Right.
The thing that, in the limited time that I have here to talk about him today, what I would want to say is when Woody came around and I introduced him to Tony Rumble and everything that unfolded after that, there was a number of years that went by after I left wrestling. I came back to an Atlantic Pro Wrestling show, and the thing that impressed me the most about him was the fact that he had taken all of the stuff that he had learned from Tony Rumble's locker room and my locker room, and he was doing it in that locker room. He made sure that he in a day where kayfabe was no longer a thing, and people like the business, people just didn't respect the privacy and the illusion of it. Right. Jim Cornette told me one time that just because of magician's tricks are tricks doesn't mean he shows you how to do them.
Right.
And Woody carried that philosophy over, as far as I know, until the very last show he was involved in. He respected wrestling, and he wanted the locker room run the same way it was run in the original locker rooms that he was in.
Right. Very, very, very great guy. And it was weird because he had just stepped away from the APW, working with them when he started coming on the show. So maybe my show was a little something for him to still stay in the wrestling business, because he came on a lot. And I really wanted to get Mickey Ward on here. And I was trying, and I never could make it happen, but I was going to bring Woody on too, because I love boxing, but Woody knew more. And I know a lot about boxing. Woody knew more about boxing than I did. I mean, we'd be talking, and he would just drop things that I had no idea. Seriously.
Well, if Eddie Hunt's watching right now, he will laugh when I say this. Woody was a know-it-all. He knew a little bit about everything, and he was very knowledgeable about sports.
Yeah.
But wrestling and boxing were probably the two that he was most knowledgeable in. But then again, baseball, football, he really knew his sports.
Right. Well,
He
I
really
got it.
did.
You know how he was a ball buster, and I found out the hard way. I posted something how Zdeno Chara left the ice, right, during a Bruins game. The puck's in your own zone. That you don't leave the ice. He did. The other team scored a goal. So I'm like, I went off on Facebook a little bit about it. Woody's arguing with me about it. So I'm finally like, didn't you see it? And he said, no, I didn't even see it. That's Woody. With sports, loves to ball bust. Him and Brian Malonis used to have great conversations going back and forth on Facebook about sports.
That's a car ride I want to be in. Malonis, Woody, and me. You can come too.
It better be a strong car.
You can come too. Yeah, better be.
I'd love to.
We'll have to get some sort of minivan for that.
Right. Back to Jimmy Valiant. You said that has he only been to 2 of Joe Bruin's Hall of Fame things?
I don't know
Because I
how.
only met him two times in a row. I saw you the second time. Was that the year before when I saw you there? Was that the first time you saw him? Because he was there twice in a row.
Yeah, it was the first time I saw him, but I want to say he was there the year prior, and I just
Yeah, he
didn't
was.
know it.
Okay, because I was at that one.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how many times that he had actually been there,
Right.
but yeah, the time that in East Providence was the first time that I met him and spent time with him.
Right. I wish I went to all of those Hall of Fame things, kicking myself in the ass now that I didn't. I'll never miss another one.
Well, I'm not.
Never.
I'm not telling the story right now but to try and sell books. I'm telling it out of complete sincerity.
Right.
I hope everyone reads about my experience with this guy, because Jimmy Valiant is he is one of the kindest, sweetest mans for one of the most notorious wrestlers that ever lived, and he really gets it. He really gets life and life after wrestling, and he really helped me to move on through some really troubled times.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, no, because when I met him, it was just so great to talk to him. He really was so gracious with his time. And obviously he was there for a certain amount of time, but you could tell he was interested in the conversation. And I got to find out something that I never knew about him with his the house that Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler bought for him in Memphis. He told me he only slept there 6 times.
Yeah, and there's
Which was, it was a nice, cool little story to hear, though.
and there's something else he did too. He painted every room in that house black.
Yeah, I knew that already. And I asked him, I said, was every room really black? And he said, yeah, Daddy.
Well, I call him Boogie forever because that's just what he's known by in the South.
Right.
But I highly recommend his book.
Right.
His autobiography is awesome. It's tremendous. There's just one story after the next.
And I always call him Handsome.
And he
Because that's when I first saw him.
well, that's who he is in the Northeast still.
Right.
But his wife Angel was also very highly involved in that book, and the Boogie and Angel put together a really great book.
Right. Oh, I definitely got to check that out. So I want to talk to more. Are you going to is there any plans on doing signings or anything like that anyway?
I mean, if the world ever goes back to any type of normal situation, yes. And I might have some podcasts lined up and other appearances. But the way the world is right now, we can only do what we can do.
Right. I do have a friend that has a show also in Merrimack. If you're interested, I could give you his information and stuff. Dan Bolio on Let Freedom Ring. He's actually been a guest on here more than anyone, like 9 times. He's just a good friend of mine. He's got a great show. It's a little different. Obviously, you do talk wrestling, but he has like segments where you talk about, current events, pop culture, sports. I think you'd like it, and would definitely help. He's got a good following up in Merrimack.
That sounds great. And while before we wrap up the show, I was
Yeah.
wondering if I could just do a few shout outs here, Leo.
Please.
You know, I'd really like to take an
Yes.
opportunity right now to thank Sheldon Goldberg. Sheldon, I want to thank you for everything that you did for me. And I love you, and I am very happy about the friendship that we've had over the years. I also want to say thank you to Jimmy Valiant and to Rusty Brown. I want to say thank you to Leo, the guy sitting next to me here, Big Woody, Joe Moakley, Derek Mitchell, people that have helped me during my time in wrestling along the way. I want to say hi to Billy King, my boss at RIPTA, at the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority, and Billy A. in the office. I want to say hi to these guys. And most of all, I want to say hi to Charlotte and Hunter sitting at home. I love you guys, and I'll be home soon.
Charlotte, if you didn't say something, I was going to throw it in there. I was going to be, and what about? So now, was it Hunter?
Yes.
Is that her son?
Yes.
How old is Hunter?
Hunter's 14.
Nice. That's a tough age. I have a 13-year-old grandson. I want to choke him and hug him at the same time. Honestly, I love him so much, but he drives me crazy. Is there anybody else you want to give shout outs to?
Well, anyone that would be interested in buying the book, I hope that you enjoy it. It's really, it's not a self-help book, but it is a personal growth book. And I hope that it helps people in all different walks of life with things that you might be struggling with in life. And I think you'll find that there are a lot of things in there that you wouldn't believe Knuckles Nelson would say.
I got to ask you about this. The yoga. It helps so many people. It's helped you. I've literally seen some of your pictures on Facebook, and some of the, like, what you can do flexibility-wise is incredible for a guy your size. It's amazing.
If I could have, I would have gotten into yoga just like DDP talks about. I've never had any involvement with his yoga program, or really don't even know him.
Right.
But I would say I've had a similar experience with how yoga has affected my body. I practiced at a place called Rhode Island Power Yoga in North Kingston, Rhode Island. And ever since the first day I walked into the yoga studio, it transformed my life. I don't lift, I never go to the gym anymore. I don't lift weights.
Right.
I learned how to breathe properly and all the poses. And really the biggest thing that's come out of it is my ability to understand mindfulness and what goes on up here, right, more than if I can stand on my head. You know, learning how to just, how to relax and how to breathe and how to, and really how to handle situations in life a whole lot better than I did before.
Right. That's awesome. My girl wants to get into the yoga big time too. She really does. I've told her that, I told her about the DDP yoga. That's the only thing I really know about yoga. You know what I mean? So I told her, so if you want to do it, we'll buy one of the things and we'll try it. It's obviously helped you, and it's helped a lot of people. Chris Jericho says he does it all the time. And look at him. What's he? 30-something year veteran in the ring, right? Just came up on 30 years, Chris Jericho.
I don't know anyone that gets involved in yoga and says, I didn't really like it. It's difficult, but the benefits are they're countless.
Right. That's awesome. I definitely should try it then. I want to thank you again for coming on the show.
My pleasure, brother.
I definitely want to go down to Boogie's camp with you one of these years too, because I thought the guy was great to meet. He was one of my idols when I first started watching wrestling.
Thank you, Leo.
Thank you, Brendan Knuckles Nelson. Guys, that's it. We're out. See you next week. Peace.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.